For years, my mother-in-law mocked me with backhanded compliments and jokes about how I wasn't good enough for her precious son. But when I played a secret recording at his bachelor party of what she really said about me behind closed doors, the room fell silent, and she couldn't laugh her way out of it anymore. Diane's presence became undeniable the moment Trevor introduced me. Her seemingly sweet remarks were laced with venom. "Oh, she's quite intriguing," she'd utter, scrutinizing me from head to toe. "I'm sure she'll eventually grow on us," she'd add, always with that smile that never quite reached her eyes. For 2 years, I endured her passive-aggressive masterpiece. At family gatherings, she'd inquire about my modest role at the nonprofit, immediately pivoting to discussions about her friends' daughters, all accomplished doctors and lawyers. My attire, my hairstyle, my accent, nothing escaped her commentary. "You possess such a distinctive manner of speaking, Bridget, truly authentic." When Trevor proposed, she embraced me, whispering, "I trust you comprehend the situation you're entering, dear." The most frustrating aspect was Trevor's perception. He saw it as harmless. "She's merely protective," he'd insist. "She teases everyone." Yet, I observed a distinct difference in her interactions with his brother's wife. Melissa received accolades for her culinary skills, her interior design flair, her invaluable contributions to the family. My comments were always backhanded, highlighting how different I was from their usual circle. Allow me to illustrate what 2 years with Diane entailed. At our inaugural family barbecue, I presented my grandmother's renowned potato salad, a recipe that had secured 3 county fair blue ribbons. I watched anxiously as everyone sampled it, eager to make a favorable impression. Compliments flowed freely until Diane took a bite. "An interesting flavor profile," she declared, setting down her fork after a single taste. "Very regional, I suppose. Some prefer more substantial dishes." She then loudly announced her lighter option for those mindful of their figures, gesturing towards her quinoa salad, which resembled rabbit fodder. Later, I overheard her confiding in her sister. I attempted politeness regarding her potato salad, but honestly, Margaret, it was drowning in mayonnaise. One can discern she's unaccustomed to catering to refined palates. My grandmother's blue ribbon recipe, dismissed as common fare. At Trevor's cousin's wedding, I wore a navy gown I'd saved for months to acquire. It was elegant, appropriate, and I felt splendid in it. Diane arrived in a nearly identical black dress. "How amusing," she remarked, surveying me. "We almost match, though I imagine navy is more youthful." I was 26, she 52. I hope people don't assume we coordinated. How mortifying that would be. She spent the entire reception making remarks about our twin outfits, each comment designed to emphasize that I had somehow mimicked her, despite purchasing my dress weeks prior. The grocery store incident was particularly mortifying. I encountered Diane at the upscale downtown market, and she immediately began scrutinizing the contents of my shopping cart like a health inspector. "Oh my," she exclaimed loudly, picking up a box of hamburger helper. "How practical. I suppose not everyone has time for scratch-made meals." This was uttered while other shoppers clearly listened. She then proceeded to lecture me on nutrition and the importance of setting proper examples for future children, all while her own cart overflowed with expensive, pre-made deli items. "It truly boils down to priorities," she concluded, loud enough for half the produce section to hear. "Some individuals prioritize convenience over quality." I yearned to vanish into the floor. Instead, I smiled and replied, "You're absolutely correct. Trevor adores my homemade mac and cheese, but sometimes, after a 12-hour day managing housing programs for homeless families, I require shortcuts." Her expression faltered slightly when I mentioned my actual job responsibilities, but she swiftly recovered. "Of course, dear, everyone strives their best." The Christmas event should have been my awakening. I dedicated weeks to crafting homemade gifts for everyone. Hand-knitted scarves, photo albums brimming with family memories, personalized ornaments with each name meticulously painted in gold script. I toiled evenings and weekends for 2 months, pouring affection and meticulousness into every stitch and brushstroke. Diane opened hers last. She held up the scarf I'd labored on for months, a beautiful cable knit in her favorite color, and declared, "How crafty. I'll have to find a special place for this." The way she pronounced crafty made it sound like an ailment. Yet, when Melissa presented store-bought candles from Bath & Body Works, Diane raved about her impeccable taste and thoughtfulness. I watched my handmade gift relegated to the side, while everyone admired Melissa's $20 impulse purchase from the mall. That night, Trevor discovered me weeping in the bathroom. "She despised it," I sobbed. "I worked so diligently, and she hated it." "She didn't hate it," he insisted. "She said it was crafty. That's a compliment." "Trevor," she made it sound like I'd given her a macaroni necklace. "You're being overly sensitive," he said, rubbing my back. Mom appreciates handmade items. She kept all my childhood art projects. What he failed to perceive was Diane discreetly slipping my scarf into a donation bag the following morning. I observed from the kitchen window as she carried it to her car with the other unwanted Christmas items. The pattern persisted relentlessly. At Trevor's birthday dinner, I suggested a restaurant serving his favorite cuisine. Diane immediately countered with a proposal for somewhere more refined. Ethiopian food is so adventurous, she said, wrinkling her nose. But perhaps we should opt for a place with broader appeal. Not everyone is comfortable with exotic flavors. We ended up at her stuffy country club, where I endured 3 courses of bland food while she regaled the table with anecdotes about her friends' children and their impressive careers. Patricia's daughter just achieved partner status at her law firm, she announced, slicing her overpriced chicken breast. And Margaret's son is completing his residency in cardiology. It's truly wonderful when young people pursue ambitious goals, she stated, looking directly at me. Of course, not everyone needs to be a high achiever. The world requires support staff too. Support staff. I managed a team of 12 individuals and had increased our nonprofit's funding by 40% in 2 years. But to Diane, I was merely support staff. The apartment search became another ordeal. Trevor and I were seeking our first place together, and Diane insisted on assisting. She dismissed every property we favored as too small, or in a questionable area, or lacking character. When we discovered a beautiful Victorian apartment that we both adored, Diane walked through once and pronounced it charming in a rustic way. Very authentic, she said, examining the original hardwood floors with disdain. I suppose some people prefer older properties, though the maintenance costs must be astronomical. She spent the remainder of the viewing highlighting every minor imperfection: a tiny crack in the bathroom tile, a window that stuck slightly, paint that was clearly of cheap quality. By the time we departed, I felt embarrassed for having cherished it. Perhaps we should continue looking, Trevor said uncertainly. That night, I contacted the landlord and placed a deposit. It was our apartment, our decision, and I refused to let Diane's negativity spoil something beautiful for us. When we moved in, Diane's housewarming gift was a set of coasters with care instructions emphasizing how easily water rings could damage vintage furniture. The message was unmistakable: you're too careless for nice things. But the cruelest blow occurred during my promotion celebration. I had worked for 3 years to become program director, competing against candidates with master's degrees when I only possessed my bachelor's. When I secured the position, Trevor was ecstatic. He suggested dinner at the fanciest restaurant in town to celebrate. Diane's response: how lovely that they're entrusting you with more responsibilities. I hope the additional workload won't interfere with your home life. Career women often struggle with balance. At dinner, she spent the entire evening discussing work-life balance and how some women prioritize careers over family. She shared statistics about divorce rates among working couples and stories about friends whose marriages had suffered when wives became overly focused on work. Of course, Bridget's situation is different, she concluded with feigned sincerity. Her job is more of a calling than a career. Social work is so commendable, even if it's not financially rewarding. I wasn't a social worker. I was a program director at a nonprofit that provided housing assistance to homeless families. But to Diane, anything that helped people was social work, and anything that didn't generate substantial profits was worthless. The engagement party she hosted for us was another exercise in subtle degradation. She invited all her friends and none of mine, crafting a guest list that made me feel like an outsider at my own celebration. I thought it would be pleasant to introduce you to our circle, she explained when I inquired about the one-sided guest list. These are the individuals you'll need to know as Trevor's wife. The entire evening was a performance where I was both the focal point and the observer. Diane introduced me to person after person with the same narrative. This is Bridget, Trevor's fiancée. She works with disadvantaged people. It's very noble work. Every introduction conveyed the same understated message. She's not one of us, but we're being gracious about it. When people inquired about my work, Diane would interject before I could properly respond. She helps people find housing, she'd quickly state, as if the specifics were too mundane or inappropriate for polite conversation. One woman, clearly perplexed, asked, "Are you a real estate agent?" Before I could clarify, Diane interjected, "Oh no, it's more charitable work, truly admirable." I spent the entire party feeling like a recipient of charity myself, showcased for her friends' approval like a rescued puppy she'd adopted. The breaking point arrived during wedding planning. We had been engaged for 6 months, and every decision became a conflict. Diane held opinions on everything. The venue was too casual, the flowers too simple, the menu not sophisticated enough. When we selected a local photographer whose work we admired, Diane produced portfolios from award-winning professionals who charged 3 times as much. I understand budget is a concern, she said with feigned sympathy. But your wedding photos are eternal. You wouldn't want to regret cutting corners on something so important. The photographer we'd chosen had beautifully captured 3 of our friends' weddings, but Diane made us second-guess everything with her subtle undermining. She questioned our choice of DJ, our decision to have a buffet instead of a plated dinner, even our selection of wedding favors. Nothing was good enough, refined enough, or appropriate enough for a wedding of this caliber. I simply desire everything to be perfect for you, she'd say with that insincere, concerned smile. This is such a significant day, and first impressions matter immensely. The rehearsal dinner venue became her ultimate maneuver. She suggested her country club, which would have exceeded our entire wedding budget. Of course, we'll need to be selective about the guest list, she said delicately. Some venues uphold standards, she stated, looking directly at me. But I'm confident we can arrange something. When I asked what she meant, she smiled sweetly. Nothing, dear, merely that your family might feel more at ease somewhere less formal. The club can be intimidating for those unaccustomed to that level of service. That's when I comprehended. She wasn't just insulting me anymore. She was targeting my family, my parents, who had toiled their entire lives to provide for us, my sister, who had completed 3 tours in Afghanistan, my brother, who managed his own thriving business. What precisely are you implying about my family? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Oh, nothing at all. She quickly backpedaled. I just believe they might prefer somewhere more relaxed, somewhere they can truly be themselves without concern for protocol. Protocol, as if my family were barbarians incapable of using the correct fork. That night, I called my mother, weeping. Perhaps I'm not suited for this family, I said. Maybe I should just call off the wedding. My mother, who had raised 3 children while working double shifts as a nurse, listened silently to my breakdown. When I finished, she remained quiet for a long moment. Bridget, she finally said, her voice firm, you are worthy of any family on this earth. Your father and I raised you to be kind, hardworking, and honest. If that's insufficient for them, that's their shortcoming, not yours. But what if Trevor begins to perceive me as she does? Then he's not the man you believe him to be. But darling, you cannot spend your entire life attempting to prove your worth to someone who has already deemed you worthless. That is not a battle you can win. Her words resonated with me for days. I began observing Diane's treatment of others more closely. The condescending tone she used with servers, the dismissive comments about neighbors who weren't affluent enough, the meticulous way she curated her social media to present a flawless image. I grasped something crucial. Diane's issue wasn't specifically with me. It was with anyone she perceived as beneath her social standing. I simply happened to be dating her son. 3 weeks before our wedding, I was collecting decorations from Diane's house when I heard voices in the backyard. Trevor's bachelor party was that night, and some friends had arrived early to assist with setting up the tent and bar. I was about to announce my presence when I heard my name. I still cannot believe Trevor is marrying that girl. Diane's voice carried clearly through the screen door. My stomach plummeted. I retrieved my phone and pressed record, my hands already trembling. She's so beneath him, Diane continued, her voice dripping with disdain. No class, no breeding. Her family's trailer trash, and it shows. I've been trying to make him see it, but he's blinded by whatever spell she's cast. Trailer trash. My parents, who owned their own home and had been married for 28 years. My family, who had never sought anything from anyone. What are you going to do? Asked a voice I recognized as Trevor's uncle. Wait and see. Girls like that always reveal their true colors eventually. She'll probably get pregnant immediately to trap him, then claim half of everything in the divorce. Mark my words. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the phone, but I continued recording. The wedding is going to be a disaster. Did you see her dress? Looks like something from a discount store. And don't even get me started on her family. I had to uninvite half the people I wanted there to make room for her people. Her people? Trevor's cousin laughed. You mean the nurse mother and the mechanic father? How tragic. Precisely. And that sister of hers with all the tattoos. I specifically requested they dress appropriately, but you know how those types are. No sense of occasion. I felt as if I would vomit. Those types. My sister's tattoos were memorial pieces for the patients she'd lost while deployed as an army medic in Afghanistan. She had once shown them to Diane, explaining the significance behind each one. Diane had nodded politely and immediately changed the subject. Have you spoken to Trevor about this? His uncle inquired. Oh, constantly, but he's stubborn. He believes he's in love. I keep hoping he'll regain his senses, but the wedding is in 3 weeks. I'm running out of time. What if you simply told him how you truly feel? Diane laughed, a cold, calculating sound that sent shivers down my spine. Please, Trevor would never forgive me. No, I must be more cunning than that. I'll play the loving mother-in-law, document every mistake she makes, every time she embarrasses the family. Eventually, he'll see what I see, and when he does, I'll be there to guide him through the divorce. She was orchestrating my marriage's demise before it even began. The prenup will assist, she continued. I ensured Trevor's lawyer included clauses about lifestyle maintenance and social expectations. If she deviates or fails to properly integrate with the family, she receives nothing. There was no prenup. We had discussed it and decided against it. But apparently, Diane had other arrangements. You're assuming she'll provide you with ammunition, Trevor's cousin noted. Oh, she will. People like her always do. They can't help themselves. Give it 6 months, and she'll do something embarrassing at a company function or family event. She'll wear the wrong attire, utter something inappropriate, reveal her true colors, and I'll be there to record every moment. The conversation persisted for another 15 minutes. She dissected my appearance in clinical detail, unfavorably comparing me to Trevor's ex-girlfriends from better families. She speculated about my motivations for marrying him, suggesting I was either a gold digger or desperate for social advancement. At least his other girlfriends possessed some breeding, she said. Remember Catherine? Her father was a judge, and Lisa's family owned that beautiful estate in Connecticut. But this one, her father fixes cars for a living. Perhaps that's what Trevor finds appealing about her. Someone I didn't recognize suggested. Please, Diane scoffed. Trevor's experiencing a phase. He believes he's being noble, rescuing some poor girl from her circumstances. But reality will set in eventually. When she starts demanding expensive items, when she becomes pregnant and neglects herself, when her family expects handouts, he'll perceive her for what she truly is. The most distressing part was overhearing her strategize ways to sabotage my marriage. She had already spoken to Trevor's boss about the importance of appropriate spouses at company events. She had made subtle comments to his friends about how different I was from his usual type. She was systematically poisoning every relationship in his life against me. I've been sowing seeds everywhere, she admitted. Little comments about her background, her education, her family circumstances. Nothing traceable back to me, of course, but people notice these things. They'll be watching for signs that she doesn't belong. When the recording concluded at 23 minutes, I sat in my car for an hour, trembling and weeping. A part of me desired to drive directly to Trevor and play it for him immediately, but I knew I needed to be strategic. Diane was correct about one thing. She was calculating and tactical. If I was going to confront her, I needed to be prepared. I spent the next 2 days duplicating the recording and storing copies in multiple locations. Cloud storage, email, USB drives. I transcribed every word, time-stamping each comment. I researched recording laws to ensure I hadn't acted illegally. I even consulted with a lawyer friend about my options. Most importantly, I made a decision about my objective. I could use this recording to harm Diane, to expose her cruelty to everyone she knew, but that wasn't the person I aspired to be. I sought justice, not vengeance. The bridal shower was that weekend. Diane had insisted on hosting it at her house, inviting all her friends and family members. The guest list resembled a who's who of the local social elite. Country club wives, charity board members, and family friends who had known Trevor since childhood. I arrived early to assist with preparations, playing the role of the dutiful daughter-in-law one last time. Oh, Bridget, you're here, she said, air-kissing my cheek with practiced affection. I was just telling Margaret about your interesting choice of flowers for the wedding. Daisies are so rustic. Margaret, one of her country club friends, offered a tight smile. How unique. I smiled back sweetly. Actually, daisies were Trevor's grandmother's favorite flower. He specifically requested them to honor her memory. I thought it was incredibly touching that he wanted to include her in our special day. Diane's face faltered for just a moment before she recovered. Of course, dear, how thoughtful of you to remember. But I caught the flicker of irritation in her eyes. She hadn't anticipated me having a meaningful reason for my choice, and my response made her comment appear petty and inappropriate. The shower unfolded precisely as I anticipated. Diane held court in her flawlessly decorated living room, delivering subtle jabs disguised as loving concern. I hope Bridget understands what she's getting into, being part of such a close family. We uphold very high standards. The other women tittered politely while my friends and family sat uncomfortably in the circle of chairs. When we played the "How well do you know the bride" game, Diane answered every question about me incorrectly, despite having known me for 2 years. She misidentified my job title, my college major, even my favorite color. But she answered with such conviction that several guests appeared confused. I thought Bridget worked in social services, one woman said hesitantly. Oh, It's all the same thing, really, Diane waved dismissively. Helping people, you know. Very admirable, even if it's not particularly substantial. My college roommate, Jen, cleared her throat. Actually, Bridget is a program director. She manages housing assistance programs for homeless families. Last year, her team assisted over 300 families in securing permanent housing. Diane's smile tightened. Of course, how lovely. The gift opening was its own unique torment. Every present I received came with commentary from Diane about its suitability or practicality. When my aunt gave me a beautiful set of kitchen towels, Diane examined them closely. Cotton blend, she announced to the room. Very economical, though I suppose not everyone requires Egyptian cotton for everyday use. When Trevor's cousin gave me a cookbook, Diane flipped through it with obvious disdain. Comfort food recipes, she said with a forced smile. How homey. I'll have to provide you with some of my lighter options once you're married. Trevor has always been mindful of his physique. After the gifts were opened and Diane had made subtle comments about the appropriateness of each one, we moved to the dining room for lunch. The conversation flowed around me as the women discussed their children's accomplishments, their husbands' business dealings, and their various charitable commitments. I listened as Diane boasted about Trevor's career prospects, his position at the firm, his promising future. She spoke about him like a prized commodity at an auction, emphasizing his value while carefully avoiding any mention of his happiness or personal fulfillment. Trevor has always been destined for great things, she announced, cutting her salmon with precise movements. The partners at his firm have already hinted at fast-tracking him to senior associate. Of course, having the right support system at home is crucial for that kind of advancement. She looked at me meaningfully. Wives can either be assets or complications. Thankfully, I raised Trevor to comprehend the importance of making strategic choices. Strategic choices. That's what I was to her. A poor strategic choice that needed rectification. One of her friends, clearly sensing the underlying message, inquired about our honeymoon plans. Before I could answer, Diane interjected, "They're undertaking something very adventurous. A camping trip, I believe. Very outdoorsy." She said this as if we were planning to reside in mud huts. "Actually," I said calmly, "we're traveling to New Zealand for 2 weeks. Trevor has always wanted to see the fjords, and I've dreamed of visiting Hobbiton since I was a child." Several women perked up with interest. "How wonderful," said Margaret. "New Zealand is supposed to be absolutely magnificent." Diane's jaw tightened. Of course, I must have been thinking of someone else's plans. But I noticed the way she glanced at her phone, probably already composing a text to someone about how I had corrected her in front of her friends. After lunch, we relocated to the living room for coffee and the final gift opening. I had reserved my performance for this moment, when everyone was relaxed and comfortable. "I wanted to express my gratitude to everyone for attending today," I said, standing with my coffee cup in hand. "It means so much to have the support of family and friends as Trevor and I embark on our life together." Diane beamed at me from her position on the sofa. "Oh, you're so welcome, dear. We're simply thrilled to welcome you into our family. Actually, that's what I wish to discuss," I continued, setting down my cup and retrieving my phone. "I've been contemplating a great deal about what it means to be part of a family, about honesty, respect, and acceptance." The room grew silent. I could see Trevor's female cousins exchanging glances, sensing that something was about to unfold. 3 days ago, I was at Diane's house collecting decorations when I overheard a conversation. I believe everyone should hear what was truly said about me and my family. Diane's face turned ashen. She began to rise. "Bridget, I don't believe this is appropriate." "You're right," I said calmly. "It's not appropriate. But it happened anyway." I pressed play, and Diane's voice filled the room, crystal clear. "She's so beneath him. No class, no breeding. Her family's trailer trash, and it shows." The silence was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop. I observed as 24 women processed what they had just heard, their faces displaying everything from shock to horror to embarrassment. I allowed the recording to play for a full minute, through the comments about my family being trailer trash, my dress appearing cheap, and my people being inappropriate for the country club. When I paused it, the silence stretched uncomfortably. "There are 22 more minutes," I said, my voice steady despite the fury burning in my chest. "Would you like me to continue?" Diane stood up shakily, her face cycling through several emotions: denial, anger, fear, and finally, desperate damage control. That's taken out of context," she stammered. "I was just venting. Everyone vents sometimes." You didn't mean to call my mother trailer trash?" I interrupted. "The woman who worked double shifts as a registered nurse to put 3 kids through college? The woman who's been married to my father for 28 years and has never missed a single one of our school plays, graduations, or important moments. My voice was gaining strength, fueled by righteous indignation. Or perhaps you didn't mean to insult my father, the mechanic who built his own business from nothing and now employs 12 people? The man who taught me that hard work and integrity matter more than social status. Trevor's Aunt Margaret was staring at Diane in horror. Diane, please tell me you didn't actually say those things. I pressed play again, letting them hear Diane's comments about my sister's tattoos and my family being those types of people. For the record, I said when I paused it again, my sister's tattoos are memorial pieces for the soldiers and patients she lost when she was deployed as an army medic in Afghanistan. She served 3 tours of duty and saved countless lives. Those tattoos represent her commitment to never forget the people she couldn't save. Several women gasped. One of them had a son in the military. And my dress, the one that supposedly looks like it came from a discount store? It cost $200 and came from the same bridal boutique where your niece bought her dress last year, Diane. I saved for 6 months to afford it because I wanted to look beautiful for your son on our wedding day. I could see some of the women doing the math, realizing that my dress had cost more than what many of them spent on their everyday wardrobes. But you know what the real truth is? I continued, my voice gaining power. None of that should matter. My family's income, my job, my background, none of it should determine whether I'm worthy of love and respect. I've spent 2 years attempting to earn Diane's approval, altering everything about myself to conform to your world, and it was never going to be sufficient, was it? I looked directly at Diane, who was now sitting back down, tears streaming down her face. Because you never perceived me as a person. You saw me as a threat to your control over Trevor. You saw me as someone beneath your social status, and that's all you were ever going to see. I pulled out printed copies of the full transcript and placed them on the coffee table. I've made copies of the entire recording. 23 minutes of pure animosity disguised as maternal concern. Trevor has heard every word. Your son, the one you claim to love and protect, now knows precisely what you think of the woman he chose to marry. The room was utterly silent, save for the sound of Diane's quiet sobbing. Margaret, who had been one of Diane's closest friends for over 20 years, slowly stood up. I believe I need to depart, she said, her voice trembling with disappointment. Please don't, I said firmly. Stay, finish your coffee, enjoy the remainder of the shower. You came here to celebrate with me, and that's what we're going to do. I'm the one who's leaving. I gathered my gifts and my purse, then turned back to address the room one final time. To everyone who came here today to support me, thank you. Your presence means more than you know. To those of you who might be wondering if what you heard changes anything, it doesn't. I'm still the same person I was an hour ago. I still love Trevor with my whole heart, and I'm still going to marry him next weekend. I looked at Diane one last time. But I'm done pretending that your approval matters to me. I'm done diminishing myself to fit into your narrow definition of acceptable. And I'm done allowing you to poison my relationship with silent compliance. I walked towards the front door, then paused with my hand on the doorknob. Oh, and Diane, you're uninvited from the wedding. Security will have your photo, so don't bother showing up. As I walked to my car, I could hear the explosion of voices behind me, some shocked, some supportive, some clearly taking sides. My phone began buzzing immediately with texts from the women who had been there, but I ignored them all. I drove directly to Trevor's office and asked his secretary if I could see him. She took one look at my face and immediately buzzed him. What's wrong? He asked as soon as I entered his office. I handed him my phone with the recording queued up. Listen to this. All of it. I sat in the chair across from his desk and watched his face as he heard his mother's true opinion of me for the first time. By the end, he was pale and trembling. I'm so sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I had no idea. I mean, I knew she could be difficult, but this. She's been planning the failure of our marriage since the day we got engaged, I said quietly. She admitted to poisoning your friends and colleagues against me. She talked about documenting my mistakes so she could assist you through our divorce. Trevor buried his head in his hands. I should have seen it. I should have protected you. You were protecting your mother, I said. I comprehend that impulse, but I needed you to protect me too. We conversed for 2 hours in his office about boundaries, about what our marriage would entail, about how we would manage his family moving forward. It wasn't easy, but it was essential. She won't be at the wedding, Trevor said finally. I'll call her tonight. I already uninvited her, I admitted. At the bridal shower. In front of everyone. Trevor's eyes widened. You played the recording at the bridal shower? Every word of it. For a moment, I thought he might be angry. Instead, he began to laugh. Not with humor, but with something akin to admiration. My God, he said, you actually did it. You confronted her publicly. She humiliated me publicly for 2 years, I said. It seemed fair. The next few days were absolute pandemonium. Trevor's phone rang constantly, with family members wanting to know what was transpiring. Some sided with Diane, claiming I had been vindictive and cruel to humiliate her publicly. Others supported me, asserting it was high time someone stood up to her manipulative behavior. His cousin Rebecca called me directly. "I've been awaiting 20 years for someone to expose her," she said. "The way she treated my mother when she married into this family was dreadful, but no one ever had proof before." Trevor's Aunt Helen, Diane's sister-in-law, was less supportive. "Family matters should remain private," she lectured me over the phone. "What you did was cruel and unnecessary." Diane made some unfortunate comments, but destroying her reputation isn't the solution. "Unfortunate comments," I replied. "She called my family trailer trash and strategized ways to end my marriage before it started. That goes a little beyond unfortunate." She was venting to friends. "Everyone says things they don't mean when they're upset." For 23 minutes, in explicit detail, while planning specific actions to sabotage my relationship with her son. Helen was quiet for a moment. "Perhaps you could have handled it more diplomatically." "I attempted diplomacy for 2 years," I said. "It didn't work. Sometimes the only language bullies comprehend is public consequences." But the most significant conversation was with my own family. When I called to inform them what had transpired, my mother was quiet for a long moment. "I'm proud of you," she finally said. "That couldn't have been easy." I was terrified, I admitted. But I couldn't let her continue treating us as if we were beneath her. "Your father and I have been working our whole lives," Mom said. "We've never been ashamed of what we do or where we come from. If she can't discern the value in that, that's her problem, not ours." My sister's reaction was more vivid. "I wish I could have been there," she said. "I would have loved to witness her face when you pressed play." "It wasn't about revenge," I said. "It was about accountability." "Sometimes they're the same thing," she replied. The wedding proceeded as planned, and despite the drama, or perhaps because of it, it was beautiful. The guest list was smaller than we had initially intended, but everyone who attended was genuinely happy to be there. There was no tension, no subtle digs, no walking on eggshells. My family was there in full force, and for the first time in 2 years, they could simply be themselves. My dad walked me down the aisle with tears in his eyes. My sister delivered a maid of honor speech that was humorous and heartfelt and required no diplomatic editing. My brother's children ran around the reception with unrestrained glee, and nobody commented on their volume or energy level. Trevor's father attended, along with several family members who had been appalled by Diane's behavior. The atmosphere was warm and celebratory, filled with people who genuinely desired to celebrate our love story rather than merely endure it. During our first dance, Trevor whispered in my ear, "I love you exactly as you are. I'm sorry it took me so long to show you that." "We're showing each other now," I whispered back. "That's what matters." Diane did not appear, but I noticed her car parked across the street during the ceremony. She sat there for the entire service, watching through the windshield as her son married the woman she had tried so diligently to drive away. A part of me felt pity for her. She was missing one of the most significant days of her son's life due to her own prejudice and pride. But mostly, I felt liberated, free from the burden of her disapproval, free from the constant criticism, free from the exhausting effort of trying to be someone I wasn't. Our honeymoon in New Zealand was everything we had envisioned. We hiked through landscapes that seemed to belong in fairy tales, explored cities that felt both familiar and exotic, and spent 2 weeks simply being ourselves, devoid of family drama or social expectations. On our final night, as we sat on the balcony of our hotel room overlooking the Bay of Islands, Trevor brought up his mother for the first time since we had left. "Do you believe she'll ever apologize?" he asked. I considered this carefully. Perhaps, but not because she recognizes she was wrong. Only if she decides she desires you in her life more than she desires to be right. And if she doesn't, then that's her choice, I said. We cannot compel people to change, Trevor. We can only determine how we respond to their choices. 6 months later, Trevor and I purchased our first house. That same Victorian apartment with the original hardwood floors that Diane had dismissed as too rustic. We hosted our first Thanksgiving dinner, and I prepared my grandmother's famous sweet potato casserole alongside Trevor's family's traditional green bean recipe. Trevor's father attended, along with the cousins and aunt who had stood by us. Rebecca brought her new boyfriend, and his uncle brought homemade wine. The conversation flowed effortlessly, filled with laughter and genuine warmth. Nobody mentioned Diane's absence, but her empty chair at the dining room table spoke volumes about the cost of prioritizing pride over relationships. After dinner, as we were tidying up, Trevor's cousin Rebecca pulled me aside. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "What you did at the bridal shower, it wasn't just courageous, it was necessary. Diane has been the family bully for decades, and everyone was too afraid to challenge her. She proceeded to recount stories I had never heard before. How Diane had sabotaged her brother's first marriage by consistently criticizing his wife until the woman finally departed. How she had made Trevor's father choose between her and his own parents, ultimately destroying his relationship with his family. How she had controlled and manipulated every relationship in Trevor's life since childhood. "You broke a cycle," Rebecca said. "Trevor is the first person in this family to stand up to her and truly mean it. You granted him permission to choose his own happiness." That evening, as Trevor and I sat on our front porch watching the sunset, Diane called. Trevor answered and put her on speaker. We had agreed on complete transparency moving forward. "I hope you're content," she said, her voice bitter and cold. "You've ruined our family." "No, Mom," Trevor replied quietly but firmly. "You did that when you decided to dislike my wife before you even knew her, when you chose your own prejudices over my happiness. I was trying to shield you from what? From marrying someone who loves me unconditionally? Someone who makes me laugh every day? Someone who comes from a family that truly knows how to love without conditions." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "She's changed you," Diane said finally, her voice full of accusation. "Yes," Trevor said, looking at me with a smile. "She has. She's made me a better person. She's taught me that love shouldn't come with a checklist of requirements. She's shown me what it means to be accepted for who I am instead of who someone believes I should be." "I gave you everything," Diane protested. "You gave me conditional love," Trevor corrected. "You gave me expectations and criticism disguised as care. You gave me the message that nothing I chose for myself would ever be good enough unless it met with your approval first. That's not true. Then name one thing I've ever chosen: girlfriend, career, apartment, hobby, anything that you supported without attempting to change or criticize." The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she had hung up. "I cannot converse with you when you're like this," she finally said. "I'm like someone who's finally speaking the truth," Trevor replied. "When you're prepared to have an honest conversation about your behavior, I'll be here. But I will not accept blame for defending my wife and my marriage." After she hung up, we sat in comfortable silence for a while, holding hands and watching the stars appear. "Do you ever regret it?" Trevor asked, referring to playing the recording, "burning that bridge so completely?" I pondered it for a long moment. "No. Some bridges need to be burned to safeguard what's on your side of them. Your mother made her choice about who I was before she ever truly knew me. Nothing I could have done would have altered her opinion. But now she's entirely out of our lives. By her choice," I reminded him. "I offered her the opportunity to apologize, to modify her behavior, to build a genuine relationship with us. She chose pride over family. That's not on me." A year later, we discovered we were expecting our first child. Trevor was overjoyed, immediately beginning to plan the nursery and research the best strollers. I was excited but also apprehensive about his family's reaction to the news. We decided to announce it at a family barbecue at Trevor's father's house. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Hugs, congratulations, and excited chatter about becoming grandparents, aunts, and uncles. Trevor's father pulled us both into a bear hug. "This baby is so fortunate to have you two as parents," he said, tears in his eyes. Later that week, Diane called. Trevor answered, and I could hear her voice through the phone, even from across the room. "I heard about the baby," she said. "Yes," Trevor replied cautiously. "I want to be involved." "That depends entirely on you," Trevor told her. "If you can treat Bridget with respect and acknowledge that she's my wife and the mother of your grandchild, then we can discuss visits. But I will not expose our child to the kind of treatment you've shown Bridget." "I never meant." "Mom, I have a recording of precisely what you meant. We both know what you said and what you intended. The question is whether you're willing to change." There was a long pause. "What would I need to do?" she asked finally. "Start with an apology, a real one, not an excuse or justification. Then we can discuss boundaries and expectations moving forward." 2 weeks later, Diane appeared at our front door with a bouquet of flowers and a letter. She looked smaller somehow, less formidable than she had in the past. "I wrote this out because I wanted to ensure I expressed it correctly," she began, her voice trembling slightly. The letter was 3 pages long and addressed to both of us. In it, she acknowledged the pain she had caused, took responsibility for her behavior, and apologized for the things she had said about me and my family. She made no excuses or attempts to justify her actions. She simply owned them. "I was wrong," she said after reading it aloud. "I allowed my own insecurities and prejudices to blind me to who you truly are, Bridget. You make my son happy in a way I've never witnessed before, and instead of celebrating that, I tried to ruin it. I'm ashamed of myself." It wasn't a flawless apology. There were still undertones of self-pity and defensiveness, but it was a beginning. More importantly, her behavior began to shift. She inquired about my work with genuine interest. She complimented the improvements we'd made to our house. She even asked my mother for her sweet potato casserole recipe. The transformation wasn't immediate or complete. There were still moments when her old patterns resurfaced, subtle criticisms disguised as concerns, attempts to impose her preferences on our decisions. But now Trevor recognized them immediately and shut them down. "Mom, that's the old behavior we discussed," he'd say calmly. "Let's try that again with respect." And surprisingly, she would. She'd pause, take a breath, and rephrase her comment in a more appropriate way. It was like observing someone learning a new language, awkward and imperfect, but demonstrating genuine effort. Our daughter was born on a sunny Tuesday morning in May. Emma Rose, named after Trevor's grandmother and my great-aunt. When Diane met her granddaughter for the first time, she wept. "She's beautiful," she whispered, holding Emma with trembling hands. "She looks like Trevor did when he was born." Over the following months, Diane slowly reclaimed a place in our lives. She babysat Emma occasionally, always adhering to our rules and schedules without complaint. She brought thoughtful gifts, board books, soft toys, practical items we genuinely needed. She even invited my parents over for dinner, making an effort to get to know them as individuals rather than dismissing them as those people. It wasn't the relationship I had once hoped for, but it was respectful and functional. More importantly, it was honest. We all understood where we stood with each other, and Emma would grow up witnessing healthy boundaries in action. The true test came when Emma was 6 months old and Trevor received a promotion at work. The firm was hosting a celebratory dinner, and spouses were invited. It was precisely the kind of event where Diane used to make subtle comments about appropriate behavior and social expectations. "Are you anxious?" Trevor asked as we prepared. "A little," I admitted. "This is the first time your mother will observe me in action at one of your work events." "You'll be fine," he said, straightening his tie. "You're exceptional at these things. You always have been." At the dinner, I watched Diane watching me as I conversed with Trevor's colleagues and their wives. I saw her note my dress, my conversation topics, my interactions with the partners. But instead of seeking flaws to criticize later, she seemed genuinely impressed. "You were wonderful tonight," she said as we were leaving. "Trevor's colleagues clearly respect you, and I can understand why. You possess a gift for making people feel comfortable." It was the first genuine compliment she had ever given me, and it meant more than I had anticipated. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot." In the car on the way home, Trevor reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you," he said. "Not just for tonight, but for everything. For confronting her when it mattered, for establishing boundaries that compelled all of us to improve, for offering her a chance to change when she finally requested one." "We all had things to learn," I said. "Perhaps. But you were the one brave enough to initiate the conversation." Last month, at Emma's first birthday party, I observed Diane playing with her granddaughter in the backyard. She was pointing out flowers and butterflies, her voice soft and patient in a way I'd never heard before. Emma giggled and clapped her hands, completely at ease with her grandmother. "She's different with Emma than she was with us," Trevor observed, approaching me. "Sometimes it requires a new generation to break old patterns," I said. "Emma will never know the version of your mother that I encountered. She'll only know the grandmother who learned to love without conditions." "Do you believe that's fair, that Emma receives the better version?" I considered this carefully. I think it's precisely what's meant to happen. We endured the difficult parts so Emma doesn't have to. We fought the battles so she could have peace. Trevor wrapped his arms around me from behind, and we stood there watching our daughter take her first steps across the lawn, Diane cheering her on with genuine delight. "Do you ever miss her?" Trevor asked suddenly. "The version of my mother who existed before all this? You mean the version who smiled to my face while planning my divorce behind my back?" I asked. "Not really. This version, the one who had to confront her own behavior and choose to change, she's actually better, more honest, more real, even though it took a public humiliation to get there." "Sometimes that's what it takes," I said. "Some people only change when the cost of remaining the same becomes too high." As if she had heard us discussing her, Diane looked over and smiled. Not the fake, calculating smile I remembered from before, but something warmer and more genuine. "Thank you," she mouthed silently. I nodded back, accepting her gratitude. We had come a long way from that bridal shower, from that recording, from the woman who had called my family trailer trash. It hadn't been simple, and it hadn't been swift, but we had constructed something superior from the remnants of what came before. That night, after the guests had departed and Emma was asleep in her crib, Trevor and I sat on our front porch swing, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the fireflies dance in our garden. "I need to tell you something," Trevor said suddenly. "What's that?" "I discovered something when I was clearing out my old room at Dad's house." He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. It's a letter my mom wrote to herself when I was born, about the kind of grandmother she wanted to be someday. I looked at the photo of handwritten words on cream-colored stationery. Even in the dim porch light, I could discern phrases like unconditional love and always supportive and never judgmental. She wanted to be the opposite of her own mother, Trevor explained. My grandmother was difficult, critical, controlling, impossible to please. Mom swore she'd never be like that. But she became precisely what she'd promised not to be, I said softly, until you compelled her to see it. The recording, the public confrontation, it wasn't just about accountability. It was about showing her who she'd become versus who she'd aspired to be. I considered this for a moment. Perhaps that's why the apology was genuine. She wasn't merely sorry for hurting us. She was sorry for disappointing herself. Do you believe that makes it better, the fact that she had good intentions originally? I think it makes it more complex, I said, but also more hopeful. People who genuinely wish to improve usually can be, if they're willing to undertake the effort. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of our neighborhood settling in for the night, a dog barking in the distance, the hum of air conditioners, the gentle creak of our porch swing. I have something to confess, I said eventually. What's that? I still have dreams sometimes about that day at the bridal shower, about pressing play on that recording. In the dreams, I'm terrified. My hands are shaking, my voice is breaking, and I keep thinking I'm making a terrible mistake. Do you regret it in the dreams? No. Even in the dreams, I know it's the right thing to do. But I'm scared of how it will alter everything. And are you scared of how it changed everything? I looked around at our life, our house, our garden, our sleeping daughter, our honest relationships. No, it changed everything for the better. But I think I'll always remember how terrifying it was to stand up for myself that completely. You know what I recall most about that day? Trevor asked. What? Coming home and finding you in the kitchen preparing dinner like nothing had occurred. You had just detonated my family's entire dynamic, exposed decades of toxic behavior, and fundamentally reshaped the course of all our relationships. And there you were, making spaghetti and humming to yourself. I laughed at the memory. I was stressed cooking. I made enough food for 10 people. But you seemed so calm, so self-assured. I was anything but calm. I was terrified that I'd gone too far, that you'd choose your mother over me, that I'd destroyed any chance of having a normal family relationship. But you did it anyway. Because the alternative was spending the remainder of my life pretending to be someone I wasn't, accepting treatment I didn't deserve, and watching our future children learn that love comes with conditions. Trevor was quiet for a long moment. I'm sorry I didn't shield you from that. You were doing your best with the tools you possessed, I said. Your normal was so different from mine that you couldn't perceive how toxic it was. But you learned. We both did. A year later, when Emma took her first steps at a family barbecue, the entire extended family was there to cheer her on. Diane was front and center with her phone out, recording every wobbling step and squealing with delight. She's going to be walking before she's one, Diane exclaimed to anyone who would listen, just like her daddy. I observed this scene with a mixture of joy and astonishment. The grandmother Emma was getting to know bore almost no resemblance to the woman who had made my life miserable for 2 years. This version was supportive, encouraging, and genuinely thrilled by her granddaughter's achievements. Later, as we were cleaning up, Diane approached me with a serious expression. I need to tell you something, she said quietly, glancing around to ensure we were alone. What is it? I've been contemplating a great deal about that recording, about the things I said, and I realized something. I waited for her to continue. I was describing my own worst fears about myself. When I called your family those people, I was truly afraid that's what people said about me growing up. When I criticized your job, I was insecure about my own lack of career. When I questioned your worthiness for Trevor, I was really questioning whether I was a good enough mother to have raised a son worth loving. Her honesty caught me off guard. That's very insightful. I expended so much energy trying to prove I belonged in the social circles I'd married into that I forgot what truly mattered. I forgot that the objective isn't to impress other people, it's to love your family well. What made you realize that? Diane looked over at Emma, who was toddling around the yard with her cousins. Watching you with her. You never worry about whether you're doing things the right way socially. You just focus on what's best for Emma. You're confident in your parenting because you're confident in your love for her. It's not that simple, I said. I worry constantly about whether I'm making the correct choices. But you don't worry about what other people think of your choices. That's the distinction. I spent 30 years parenting based on what would appear favorable to outsiders rather than what was actually beneficial for Trevor. This conversation resonated with me for weeks. It made me realize that Diane's journey toward change was more intricate than I had understood. She wasn't merely learning to treat me better. She was learning to treat herself better too. The recording that had seemed like such a weapon at the time had transformed into something else entirely. It was evidence of transformation, proof that people can fundamentally change if they're willing to confront their own shadows. 2 years after that first birthday party, we welcomed our second child, a son we named after Trevor's grandfather. When Diane met her grandson for the first time, she held him with the same reverence she'd shown Emma, but with an additional layer of wisdom earned through experience. "He's perfect," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "They both are. You and Trevor are such wonderful parents." As I watched her with our children, I sometimes thought about that woman from the recording, the one who had been so terrified of losing control that she'd been willing to destroy her son's happiness to maintain it. That woman felt like someone from another lifetime, someone we'd all evolved beyond. But I never completely forgot her. She served as a reminder of how far we'd all progressed, and of how crucial it is to choose love over fear, acceptance over control, and growth over pride. The recording still exists somewhere in my cloud storage, though I haven't listened to it in years. Sometimes I consider deleting it, but then I remember that it's not just evidence of Diane's lowest moment. It's also evidence of my highest one. The moment I decided to stop accepting less than I deserved and began fighting for the family I wish to build. That struggle transformed all of us for the better. Trevor learned to establish boundaries with his mother and prioritize his own family. Diane learned to love without conditions and to see past her own insecurities. And I learned that defending yourself isn't selfish. It's essential. Our children will grow up in a family where love doesn't come with a checklist, where acceptance isn't contingent on meeting someone else's expectations, and where honest communication is valued over polite pretense. Sometimes the most loving action you can take is to refuse to enable someone's worst behavior. Sometimes progress necessitates confrontation. And sometimes, the only way to construct something superior is to be willing to dismantle what isn't functioning. The day I played that recording was the day our true family story began.